Hey, it's Russell Ian. And I know I'm doing a lot of gaming content with military type games, but I want to talk a little bit about the culture of the United States Army. And all militaries have this mythology, folklore, campfire stories, if you will, that we tell. This is something that I like, this oral history and these things that they're passed down generation to generation, where they're usually spread during downtime, like in the field when you're not doing much, you're sitting around. Like, I'm a tanker, and you sit around your tanks at gunnery on a day off, eating chow, and everybody is telling stories about what happened at their last unit, what they heard happened at their last unit. And you start to notice that a lot of these stories, you hear the same stories coming from different people, and they're talked about different units. So we have so many of these folk tales that I just wanted to share some of them. Now, some of you might be in the military or might be veterans, and you've heard these or different versions of them, and that's great. Some of you might not have heard any of this at all, and I just want to share some folk tales from the United States Army. So let's go. Number 1, the last call home. We need to start this out by telling that tanks are very dangerous pieces of equipment. There are 1,000 ways they can kill or maim you, even in the motor pool, without the guns or the ammunition or anything. They are very dangerous. So, our story begins as a soldier is in the motor pool. His tank is not working. He's trying to start it, and unfortunately, he pushes the push to start button, and there's no power. So he knows he needs to slave his tank. Now, slave start a vehicle, this just means like a jump start. So he looks over to his left, and there's his buddy in his tank. And he asks him, "Hey, can you slave me off?" And of course he's like, "Sure. Not a problem." So they get the slave cables, which are the jumper cables for a tank, and they try to reach them over to the slave port, but unfortunately, since his tank is on the wrong side, they don't reach. So they decide they need to move the other tank to start it. So the guy's buddy, he gets in the tank, and our soldier, he starts to ground guide him around. Now, for some reason, he decides he's going to put the tanks nose to nose. And he's standing there, and he's standing in front of his tank trying to guide the other tank in to a good position so that the slave cables can reach. And unfortunately, the driver in the second tank, he slips on the throttle, and his tank lurches forward, and it pins the soldier between the two tanks. Now, our second soldier, the one, he shuts down his tank. He doesn't know what to do. Here is this guy from his platoon, and he's stuck between these two tanks. So the first soldier, he's in shock. He doesn't understand what exactly is happening, and he's afraid, and everyone's afraid. So the medics are also in the motor pool, and they get the medics over there, and the medics they're taking a look at this guy, and they're pretty worried because it's obvious that everything below or from the hips and above and below has been severed, but the tanks somehow are holding this man together, and they're stopping the bleeding and everything, but he is essentially cut in half. and it's just the pressure from the two tanks that are holding him together. So they call an ambulance, and the ambulance comes and doctors come, and unfortunately they have found that when they're going to separate, when they're going to back up the tank, he's not going to live. He's going to fall in half, basically. So the only thing that is keeping him alive at this point is the pressure from the two tanks. So they understand that this is a very bad situation, and the soldier is married. So what they do is they go to the maintenance bay, to the maintenance office, and they get a really long phone cord. And because this is before cell phones, and they bring the phone out to the tanks, and they let the man, the soldier here that's stuck between the two tanks, call his wife. And he calls his wife, and he tells her that, hey, I'm pinned between two tanks. There's nothing they can do. I love you. This is the last call I'm gonna make. This is the last time you're gonna hear my voice, because when they move this tank, I'm going to die. And with that, he says goodbye to his wife. They don't want her to come to the motor pool to see her husband in this terrible state. After he hangs up, the second tank, they start it up, they back up, and the soldier, his legs fall, his torso falls, and he has been cut in half, and he bleeds to death right there in the motor pool. But at least the way he died, he was able to call his wife one last time. Number 2, the dancing Kimlight. So there was a soldier, a specialist in E4. He PCS's from Fort Riley to Germany. Now this is the mid-90s. There's not a whole lot going on. The main mission is Bosnia. So he gets to Germany in about March, and he's sitting in his barracks room one night, and his shades are open, and he sees this green Kimlight just spinning around in a window across the way in the other barracks, the neighboring barracks. And this light, it's so distracting, he needs to just close his shades and goes to sleep. The next night, he sees the same thing. And then they go to a field problem, and they come back, and it's about April, mid-April, beginning of May. It's starting to get warmer. So he opens his window, and he hears this loud techno music, and he sees the dancing Kimlight in the window again. So he's like, oh well, I'll just close my window tonight so I don't have to be annoyed by this music and this Kimlight. Well, he keeps this up for a week, and it's starting to get warmer and warmer, and every night there is this Kimlight and this music. So he's had enough, and one night, it's a Monday night, they just had a rough day. It was command maintenance day, so he decides he's had enough, and he goes over to this window where there is the loud techno music, and there is the dancing, the Kimlight that is spinning around. Now remember, this has been going on every day since he's been in Germany. Every day since he got to Schweinfurt, there has been this dancing Kimlight. So he's like, I've had enough. And he walks on over, and as he approaches the window, he notices something. The Kimlight, it's not being held in a hand. It's not hanging on a string. It's sticking out of the ass of a guy. He is just dancing away with the Kimlight inserted into his rectum, just dancing, and he has been doing this every night since this soldier got to Germany, and he doesn't know what to do. So he goes and he calls his first line supervisor, his sergeant. The sergeant's like, "What are you talking about?" So the next night, the sergeant stays there, and he goes over there with his specialist to see what is going on with this dancing Kimlight. And it's the same thing. There is a Kimlight in another soldier's rectum, and he is just dancing away to techno music. So they're like, well, we got to stop this. So they go inside, they talk to the CQ at the barracks, and they're like, okay, well, let's go. And they find out what room it is, and it's one of the other units in the brigade, but it's one of their cooks. So there is a cook that works at the DFAC that every day has been dancing to techno music, putting Kimlights in his rectum. After that, this cook, he had to go to the mental hospital, and he was probably chaptered out of the army because the specialist, he never saw the dancing Kimlight again after that. Number 3, Jody's baby. So this happened in Germany, as a lot of stories do. There was a soldier that was married. He was a supply sergeant for a tank unit, and his wife was pregnant. And this sergeant, he was a little suspicious because the timing just wasn't lining up right with how pregnant his wife was. They had been in the field, were deployed, so the timing was there a little bit, but he wasn't quite sure. But he didn't tell his wife any of this, and he was around the unit, and he was excited that his wife was gonna have a baby, and he didn't show any signs of any suspicion or anything. So one day his wife, she goes into labor. So she has the baby, and the sergeant, he goes to the hospital, and he sees the baby, and he's like talking with his wife, talking about how this boy, it's going to be named such and such, and it's great, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to get you some flowers and a teddy bear and all kinds of stuff for the baby. So he goes, but he goes to the unit. He goes to the unit headquarters. He goes in his supply cage. Some of the soldiers see him in there, and they're like, "Oh, hey, Sergeant so-and-so, how are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, fine, just had a baby." And they're like, "Oh, congratulations." So then some time passes, and he shows up at the hospital, and he's carrying a bag and he's got the flowers in one hand, this bag in the other hand. He walks in to his wife, and he's like, "Oh, here's the flowers, and here's something else for you." And he throws her the bag. And what the bag is the head of her boyfriend that is also the father of the baby. He could tell just by looking. He knew this man that he suspected was that. So he waits, and he gets arrested, and of course he goes to jail for murder. But what had happened was he went to the supply cage to get an axe that was back there that had come from a tank that needed to be DX, which turned in to get a new axe. And he went to this man that he knew that was at another unit, had him come outside, and in the parking lot, he cut his head off with the axe, left his body there, and put the head in a bag, drove to the hospital, and gave his wife Jody's head. So, there you have it. There are 3 U.S. Army folk tales that I've heard hundreds of times in hundreds of different iterations, probably. So, I hope you enjoyed those as much as I did. I've got tons of them stowed away in my head. so I can make more content like this, I think, if it's well received. So if you liked it, please subscribe for more content like this and some more gaming stuff, and I will see you guys in the future. All right, goodbye.